There's a rhythm to the long haul. It starts in your bones and settles into a hum that's always there, like a low-grade fever. My run this time was a straight shot from Chicago to Miami. Not the worst route, not the best. You get used to the stretches of I-65 and I-75, the way the landscape changes from the flat, predictable fields of the Midwest to the humid, vibrant chaos of the Florida coast. This time I was hauling a load of automotive parts. Nothing too heavy, nothing fragile, just a routine delivery. I left the Chicago terminal at 4 a.m., the air cold enough to bite. The first 2 days were all about the miles. You watch the sun rise over Indiana cornfields, drive through Kentucky, watching the rolling hills flatten out as you hit Tennessee. You eat bad food at truck stops, drink coffee that tastes like burnt transmission fluid, and listen to the CB chatter. It's a job where you spend 90% of your time alone, but you're surrounded by ghosts of conversations. The beauty of this run is that once you're out of the Midwest and past Atlanta, you're just cruising. The air gets thicker, heavier. The light changes. It gets brighter, sharper, reflecting off the swamps and the saltwater air. The delivery in Miami was uneventful. I backed the trailer into the distribution center lot in Hialeah, got my paperwork signed, and within an hour, I was deadheading, driving empty, northbound. That's when the job stops being just a job and starts being a way to connect. I had a couple of days to make it back to Chicago for the next load. I was ahead of schedule, with nothing but open road and a clean logbook. I had a choice. Just push hard and get home early, or take a slight detour and visit an old friend. This friend, Mike, he's one of those guys you knew back when, the kind who stays in the background until life throws you a curveball. He lived in rural Georgia, maybe 40 miles off my route. The thought of that detour, the quiet of the back roads, sounded better than another night in a truck stop. I punched in his coordinates. I didn't know it yet, but this detour was going to lead to a story that stuck with me long after I got back on the road.
I-75 North. The air conditioning was fighting a losing battle against the heat and humidity of a Georgia afternoon. The rhythm of the road was the same, but the intention was different. Instead of focusing on the miles, I was focused on the destination, Mike's place. We hadn't seen each other in maybe 4 years, not since a mutual friend's wedding. Mike was an old buddy from my early days in the service. Not a combat buddy, but a guy who'd seen some stuff. The kind of experiences that teach you to look at life a little differently. I took the exit at some small Georgia town, the name of which I've forgotten now, and the smooth interstate gave way to a state highway that was narrower and older. The trees grew closer, forming a canopy that offered some shade but made the world feel small and contained. The speed limit dropped, and I had to start watching for slow tractors and the local sheriff. The stress of the long haul started to melt away. This was the appeal of the detour. It wasn't about efficiency or time limits. It was about getting off the clock, even for a day. The road curved through deep green woods and past small, sleepy towns with old brick buildings and gas stations that still used manual pumps. The further I went, the less my GPS seemed to know where it was. It kept trying to redirect me back to the interstate. But I trusted my gut and the rough map I'd sketched out. Finally, I turned down a dirt track, the gravel spitting up from under my tires, and saw the sign from Mike's place. He lived in a remote valley in a small, rustic cabin with a wraparound porch. A rusted-out pickup truck sat in the driveway. It felt like stepping back in time. I pulled the rig into the yard, careful not to tear up the grass, and shut off the engine. The sudden silence was thick and complete. I could hear the crickets and a far-off bird. I stepped out of the cab, stretched my aching back, and was about to knock on the door when Mike stepped out onto the porch, a wide grin on his face.
Mike looked exactly the same, maybe a little more gray around the temples, but the same calm demeanor. We shook hands, the grip firm and familiar. "You crazy son of a gun," he said. "I figured you'd just blow through like usual." "I was ahead of the game," I replied. "Couldn't pass up a chance to see your miserable face." He led me inside. The cabin was exactly what you'd expect, rustic, filled with old books, a crackling fireplace even in the summer heat, and the smell of fresh coffee. We spent the first hour doing the mandatory catch-up. I told him about the weird things I'd seen on the road, the rig that lost its loaded chickens in Alabama, the time I hit a deer in Wisconsin. He told me about his quiet life, working with local construction, fish in the nearby river, and watching the world move a little slower. We were sitting on the porch as the sun started to dip below the ridge, the air cooling. Mike brought out a couple of cold beers. The conversation drifted toward travel and technology. "You fly much these days?" Mike asked, taking a sip of his beer. I laughed. "Fly? I haul. I'm allergic to sitting in those cramped little metal tubes. Besides, I prefer to keep my wheels on the ground. Less chance of losing my stuff." Mike chuckled, a dry, weary sound. "Ah, losing your stuff. You'd think it's a simple thing, right? A minor inconvenience. But sometimes losing a suitcase is like losing a piece of your history. You ever heard that saying about how sometimes the journey is more important than the destination?" I nodded. "Sure, we all have. But I've been on the road for 20 years. For me, it's mostly about the destination and making the delivery on time." Mike took a long pause, looking out at the darkening trees. "Yeah, I used to think that too. But then I lost my bags in Atlanta. It wasn't the bags that mattered. It was what was in them. And the search, well, the search taught me a lot about what really matters." He leaned back in his chair, and the light went out of his eyes a little, replaced by the distant look of a man about to revisit a traumatic memory. "You got a minute? It's a long story."
Mike began his story. It was about 8 years ago. He was flying from Phoenix, Arizona to Atlanta, Georgia. A pretty standard trip. He was going to a memorial service for his aunt, a woman who had meant the world to him. He was carrying 2 bags, one with his clothes, and the other, a small carry-on, was filled with specific sentimental items. "It wasn't expensive stuff, man," Mike said, his voice low and serious. "No jewelry, no cash. But my aunt, she was a photographer. She was the one who bought me my first camera when I was maybe 8 years old. She took incredible photos. In that bag, I had some old photo albums, her favorite camera she used when I was a kid, and a few little trinkets that were impossible to replace, stuff she'd given me over the years." The flight was fine. The landing was on time. It was busy at the Atlanta airport, as it usually is. Mike had checked his bags, and he went to the carousel waiting for them to pop out. He waited for half an hour. His bag didn't show. He went to the baggage claim office, a massive room filled with tired, stressed people. The representative typed in his information, looked at him with a practiced, weary expression, and said, "Sir, your bags weren't scanned onto the plane in Phoenix. They're still on the tarmac." "Okay," Mike said, trying to stay calm. "Can you have them sent to me?" "We'll try. We'll send them on the next available flight. Should be here in 4 to 6 hours. Mike needed the bag of clothes for the service, but the sentimental carry-on was the one that mattered. He went to the service, borrowed some clothes from a cousin. He called the airline the next day. "Bags are still in Phoenix," they said. The days stretched into a week. He was due to fly home, but the bags were still missing. Every phone call was met with a different answer. "We've located them in Minneapolis." "No, they are in Dallas." "Actually, sir, we think they are in Miami." It was a maddening game of phone tag with the airline's automated system and seemingly indifferent staff. Mike said the frustration wasn't about the luggage, it was about the feeling that nobody cared, that these priceless items to him were just a number on a screen to them.
Mike got desperate. He was back home, and the phone calls were doing nothing. He started emailing. Then he found a number for a regional manager. He called and called until the guy finally picked up. Mike explained the situation, emphasizing the sentimental value. The manager, surprisingly, seemed to genuinely care. He said he would put a trace on both bags. The clothes bag was found relatively quickly. It had been misplaced in the warehouse in Phoenix. It was shipped to him a few days later, battered but intact. The small carry-on, the one with the photos and the camera, was still missing. "It felt like I was chasing a ghost," Mike said, shaking his head. "They'd tell me it was in one city, and by the time I called back to confirm, it was gone again. The airline lost it 4 times, according to their own records. I realized they weren't really looking for it. They were just processing it as missing luggage and waiting for it to show up at a liquidation sale. Mike started to get creative. He remembered his aunt had taped a small piece of paper with her old phone number inside the camera bag. He thought maybe, just maybe, an honest person who found it would call the number. He started reaching out to friends in different cities, asking if they knew anyone who worked in airline baggage handling. He was getting nowhere. The chase felt absurd. He was spending hours on the phone, filing reports, just to locate a small carry-on bag. It was exhausting, but he couldn't give up. The items in that bag felt like the last physical connection he had to his aunt. Every time he had a dead end, the grief over her loss mixed with the frustration of the airline's incompetence, and he felt a cold, hard knot of anger tighten in his chest.
I was ready to give up, Mike said, staring into his nearly empty beer bottle. I told myself it's just stuff, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was abandoning her memory. So I went for one last Hail Mary. He decided to go to the Atlanta airport's baggage claims office in person. It was a 3-hour drive from his house. He showed up at 6 a.m. before the rush. He didn't ask for a representative. He asked to speak to the manager of the baggage claims department. He was polite, firm, and persistent. He didn't yell or get angry. He just explained the situation one more time, looking the manager right in the eye and focusing on the sentimental value. The guy listened, Mike said. I think he saw how desperate I was. He said, I can't promise anything, but I'll check the unclaimed area personally. That's a place to keep the bags that have been found but haven't been matched with a claim yet. Mike waited in the lobby for 4 hours. He watched people come and go, all with the same lost, stressed look. Then the manager returned, holding a small, beat-up carry-on bag. It was the one! I started shaking, man. It was like finding a buried treasure. The manager handed it to me and apologized, said it must have gotten misscanned when it was found. I thanked him, and I walked out of that building feeling lighter than I had in weeks. He got to his car and opened the bag. Everything was still there. The photo albums, the old camera. He pulled out the first album and opened it. A photo of him as a little kid, sitting on his aunt's lap, smiling. It was just a picture, man, Mike said, his voice catching. But in that moment, it wasn't about the airline or the incompetence. It was about the fact that this little piece of my past, this memory of my aunt, was safe. He drove home that day, not thinking about how much trouble it was, but how precious the things we carry are, the things that can't be replaced with money or a simple insurance claim.
The evening stretched into night. We talked a little more about life, about the strange ways things happen, and how you never know what's going to resonate with you until it hits you. I spent the night in Mike's guest room, the first time in months I hadn't slept in a sleeper cab. It was a good sleep. The next morning, I packed up and got ready to hit the road. Mike walked me out to the truck. We shook hands again. Thanks for stopping by, he said. Thanks for the story, Mike, I replied. It's a good one. He smiled. Yeah, I guess it is. I pulled Red back onto the dirt road and then back onto the highway. The ride back to Chicago was smooth, but the rhythm of the road felt different. Mike's story had stuck with me. We truckers, we get focused on the efficiency, the miles, the deadlines. We carry precious cargo, but we don't always think about the fragility of what we're moving. And sometimes the most valuable things we transport aren't in the trailer. They're the memories, the connections, the stories we carry in our minds. I thought about how easy it is to get lost in the noise of the job, the constant need to move forward. But sometimes you need a detour. You need to pull over, shut off the engine, and listen to a story about a lost bag and the photos inside. You need to remember that the most important cargo is the stuff that can't be replaced, the things you chase with a desperate kind of love, no matter how much time and effort it costs. It was just a story about lost luggage, but to Mike, and now to me, it was a story about everything that truly matters.